you say and what you mean. It can be two different things, and I ain't got no time to waste. Said you're taking up my time, and you ain't no friend of mine. Planting seeds, you wanna take it from me. Set it free, you want to change on me. Say that nothing's wrong, but you know, I know, they know, yeah. Keep on preaching, we get on through. Keep on reaching, we get the truth. Said you gotta keep praying. Come on, you wanna find the truth. Can I get on up?
Hey guys, welcome to Surf and Show. I'm Noel Salas, and today's surfboard review is on the Moskah by Xanadu Surfboards. And I'm stoked to say that I've got Max Hoshino that I met out surfing, absolutely shredding on a Xanadu. And I said, hey, we stoked if you joined us on a review. Here we are. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Stoked.
So before we get talking about the Moskah, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do for a living and how you got so good at surfing?
Sure. So I'm an orthopedic trauma surgeon. Means I fix broken bones for a living. Nice thing is I have a flexible schedule and allows me to surf a lot. And whenever the waves are good, I'm out there.
You're out there.
I'm a lifelong surfer. I love surfing. Did some competing, and now I love surfing. And I surf as much as I can for fun.
Now Xanadu and I do have a bit of a history together. Back in the late 90s, on the last couple years on the QS, he shaped me some boards. They went great. Mm-hmm. So he's a world-class shaper in my book. And you've been riding Xanadus for a while, or?
Yeah, so I've been riding Xanadus for over 20 years, and agree with you 100%. World-class shaper, and so stoked to get one of his boards on here for review.
Yeah. So that's kind of how it happened. I'm not very familiar with his lineup of boards because I've been focused on a bunch of other different boards. Mm-hmm. And you were riding the Xanadu, so I said, hey, Max, why don't you think about what kind of board would go good for, SoCal surf. And I kind of talked about more or less like what our community kind of gravitates towards, or looking at those daily drivers. So sure. Tell us how you came up with the Moskah, maybe talking with Xanadu, whatever. How'd that go?
Sure. So I went to him to just ask what board, what model did he think would go well for the review.
Sure.
And he's familiar with your show and some of the boards that you've reviewed in the past. So he thought this would be a great model because it is sort of a daily driver model, just a step down from a shortboard.
Right.
But it's still high performance. And it's a very reliable board. So he was telling me that, more than 90% of the people that order this board are stoked with it, that it works for them.
Right. Now, when I kept talking to you every day that we'd be surfing, you were riding high-performance shortboards like 90% of the time, right? Yep. I mean, I never saw you on anything other than a high-performance shortboard. So is riding the Moskah, has that been a transition for you?
I thought it was great because it's maybe a touch easier to surf when the waves are a little bit smaller. Or a little bit weaker, right. But at the same time, you can rip this board like a high-performance shortboard. So I thought it had attributes of both, and so that made it a really sort of useful board as far as something that would work on a lot of different conditions for me.
So you found the transition from a high-performance shortboard to a board like the Moskah to be relatively easy for you to move into, or?
For sure. In fact, very easy to make that transition. Harder to go the other way.
Right. So we would say this board suits for intermediate all the way to pro level, that maybe 2 to 6 foot surf, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. So exactly. So the sweet spot is around that. And some of the waves that we surfed it on were on the upper edge of that.
Right.
Board seemed to hold in, work well.
Sure.
And exactly, I think it's generally meant for sort of the intermediate to more high performance surfer.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the board a little bit. As we look at it here now, Xanadu talks kind of different on his website, and I know you're real familiar with the whole lineup of boards, but this has low center rocker, right? Relatively flat, so it's got good get up and go speed down the line. It's got low entry rocker, and then I was reading that he keeps the low center rocker in the front of the board, but then he's adding a little bit of rail curve, right? Yep. So that way we can get a lot of speed down the line, and we won't get that nose to dig as much as if he didn't add that rail curve, right?
Exactly. So with this board, it's considered a family 3 model, which means most of the rockers towards the rear of the board, towards the back 1/3 of the board, towards the tail. But with this board, exactly what you said, he did try to keep some a higher rail rocker than center rocker, which will help you with that transition into your front rail when you're transitioning into like a carved turn and
Right.
really engaging that part of the board.
Sure.
That way it doesn't dig.
Right, so especially on the flatter wave or a fat kind of mushy wave, which is when you step off a high performance shortboard. This is why we're going to boards like this. Not only are they easier to surf, I feel like they carry more speed down the line. They carry more speed in flat spots. So if I take off and the wave's real good, like on a beach break, I get going real fast. And then there's that flat spot where I'm like, hop, hop, hop.
Yep.
And then you get going and then you start again. I feel like this board did it real well.
Yeah, really felt like that to me as well. It really had good glide.
Right.
As well as drive. So
Sure.
sort of separating the two things. And you can rip this board too. I mean, you can turn hard on this board. So I like that it did have the aspect of the high performance shortboard, but still having those characteristics of the daily driver that you're kind
Sure.
of talking about.
Sure, and so you would probably equate that being able to rip and getting those quality turns because we have a medium exit rocker. Would you say that's about a medium?
Yeah, so I think having a little bit more of the rocker and the exit of the board as the water flows off the board allows you to transition your weight back if you need to really do a tight snap, or allows you to release the tail if you want to try to get a little bit of tail release.
Right.
And so I thought having the rocker back there really worked pretty well for this board and the waves that we surf.
Sure.
Although it sometimes takes a little getting used to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you do have to know the board a little bit.
I agree with that. So the other thing I want to mention and talk about is the wide point on this board is a little bit back from center. So what I like about this board is in the nose, I feel like it's even relatively narrow for it being a board that has that daily driver title.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
And with that rail curve up there, it keeps it nice and easy go rail to rail, and it kind of had that flow to it. But with a wide point back from center, I felt like the board could pivot real quick. So I didn't have to come off the bottom and blast the turn. I could set it up there and kind of use that as a maneuver to get to the next section. Did you feel that too? Or?
For sure. I thought this board was, what I liked about this board, both backside and front side, was that you could do those tight turns, but then when you wanted to draw out a carve,
Sure.
you could also do that. So I thought not all boards are like that. You know, some boards really wanted to snap, or some boards just want to kind of do a more gradual carve. But
Right.
this one, I felt fit, at least the type of carves I like to do, type of rail turns I like to do, really fit well on both backside and front side.
Right. One of the things that happened with me was Xanadu shaped me a 5.8 at first. And because it has a flat deck, I felt like the tail was actually too thick back here
Okay.
because it carried the volume. And Xanadu was kind enough to shape me a 5.7, which is this board right there. Yeah, this one's yours. And then I got this 5.6. And one of the things I was feeling and experimenting with was, as he tapered this down, I could get it to sink faster. Like I said, it had great flex and feel. The glass job's relatively light, so very responsive. But with the flat deck and him carrying that out here, it moved the apex of the rail down lower, and it had great bite. And you were talking about doing big carves, and I really felt like this board had good hold, even in the sizable surf we got, right?
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think about, how did it feel under your feet with the flatter deck? And
Yeah, no, I think it felt great. I think it's a rail. It's a medium rail, but it is turned down just a little bit, so it has some bite to it, like you
Right.
said, for carving. And he does thin. He did thin it. He does want to keep it fairly thin. I was talking to him about in the tail because he wants to keep a fair amount of flex in the tail.
sure.
But yeah, no, I thought that it felt great. It kept enough volume for me as well for paddling.
Right. So since you talk about volume, let's talk about that for a second. So I'm 5'9", 160. You're 5'8", and 160.
Yep.
What's the volume on your board?
I think that board's a 24 even.
24.
Yeah. So
Okay.
5'7" though.
5'7".
5'7",
So you like a less volume on your boards compared to what I like. Because I'm riding like 25 and a half all the way to 26 and a half.
Right.
Right? So are you riding your high performance short boards and your small wave performance boards, like your step down kind of boards, are roughly the same volume? What do you do there?
Yeah, I do roughly the same volume. Roughly, you know, my range is the high 23s to probably the high 24s.
Right.
Once I get below or above that, I'm sort of either too much board or I'm sinking.
Right.
But talking to Xanadu about this board, he didn't want me to go too much volume.
Right.
He wanted it to maintain be very responsive. So you could rip it like a short board.
Right.
And he was sort of saying you don't need the extra volume with this particular board to get that glide or that flow that you want in smaller waves.
Sure. So Max, we're going to talk a little bit about concave and kind of what you prefer, okay? But the Xanadu website says it has a flat V in the nose to basically a moderate single concave to flat out the tail here. And we ran a flat edge on it, or straight edge, and the flat V is so subtle, it's really hard to see to the naked eye. And then the single concave is relatively moderate. Would you agree?
Agree.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the single concave goes all the way through and then relatively flat behind the third fin.
Right.
Right? Okay, so do you ride a lot of single concave boards?
Sure. So coming from just riding sort of high performance short boards, I always kind of tended to like a fairly simple bottom of the board. And I like that with surfboards in general, kind of like keep it simple.
Right.
And so this board is like that. It's like exactly what you described. It's a fairly straightforward single concave. And that's just reliable. It feels good to me, and that's sort of what I've been riding.
Right. Okay. So, with you saying that, have you found it hard to transition from like a high performance shortboard, daily driver, low rocker to like Groveler? Tell us a little bit about your surfing board characteristics and what you like, and what if you're transitioning to something new.
Sure. So for me, the hardest transition is always going from something that's looser to something that's tighter.
Right.
And so going from, let's say, small wave performance board to like a high performance short board is always difficult for me. I do tend to feel when I go down that's occasionally I'm always looking for a board that still holds in, that I'm not going to overpower.
Right.
So if I'm going from a daily driver to like a really small wave board, I sometimes I have the tendency to feel that board I'm just overpowering it.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Now I want to talk about the fins we chose on the Moskah. Now your board was FCS2 only, right?
Right.
Okay. So tell us what you're riding.
So I started out riding the Almeric medium fin.
Right.
And that's a common fin that I just use for short boards and boards like this. And it went great. I thought it had a fair amount of release, because of the smaller fin in the back, the smaller trailer. But had pretty good bite because of the rake, and I thought it was a fairly good, reliable fin, and it's something I was used to.
Sure.
Anyway, then I went to the Almeric large fin.
Yep.
And that was sort of on your recommendation. Try to get a little bit more bite, a little bit more drive out of the board, and theoretically it should have done that, but for whatever reason, I felt that this just didn't go well with the board, or just a large fin for me was just too much fin.
Right.
And I felt that the board. It just really tightened the board up to the point where I couldn't really do what I was doing before. It was a really big difference. It did give me a little more drive, but I felt that the turns were much more difficult to kind of like execute.
Tell us, you have the Mick Fanning. That's a medium fin. Tell us how that went. Did you try that?
So this went great, yeah. So I thought that this sort of solved some of the issues that I was looking to solve with changing the fins out. So I thought this. I still had the release I needed, and that's probably because there's that exit tail rocker,
right?
Giving you enough looseness in the tail. But at the same time, I had a little bit more drive than the medium Almeric fins,
right?
Which were the first fins I tried. So I rode the board with these for a lot of the sessions I had rode that board. And I thought they were good, sort of all around fin for that particular board.
Okay, so for me, I started with the AM2 in the Futures. Now I got the board with the Future plugs way before I got the FCS2 plug board. Mm-hmm. And I started with these, and it felt like I got some good waves, some good turns, and I almost felt like the board, because of so much rake, it almost felt like the board was a little bit stiff. Now remember, I have a narrow stance, and I'm transitioning from 5'2" fishes and all that stuff, so I'm always looking for the transition to be like, how can I get this board to turn faster even though it's longer, right? And it's with this being 5'7", this one's 5'6", but that Futures one's 5'7". So for me, it was about finding the right fin to get this board to feel good, and it was really about the Hayden shape fin for me. So the bulk of the surfing that I got was on a little bit more upright fin, so I could get the board to turn real quick. And I felt like I kept it large, and the reason I kept it large is because I'm going upright, I want that base to give me that drive, and I can pivot and turn it real quick. So I rode the Hayden shapes, I rode the John Tech Flex, which is probably a little bit stiff, but Futures doesn't really have a honeycomb upright fin, so they have the WCT, which is medium. So I ended up finding myself in between the Hayden shape and the John. So for the most part, I found the board really liked a large upright fin for me. But if I were gonna ride a raked fin, I'd go down to a medium and capture the speed that way. So let's look at some waves together. I'd say this is about 4 to 5 feet. This is the AM2s, throwing nice spray right there. This is the high end for this board, in my opinion. Nice little left here. Watch the wave kind of go flat. Nice down carve. Look how quick the pivot is. That's the wide point back from center. This right, I'm behind. Nice speed right there. Able to get right back in the section. Now this little left, just one pump. And then I'm right where I want to be. So the board's got the speed I'm looking for. Nice little turn right there. As this wave kind of winds down, just that quick pivot is what I really like about it. Now look at the speed on this right. Able to slam this turn. That felt great through a ton of water right there. Now this little left, I like how low I can be to the board, and it's rail to rail real smooth. So Max, we've talked pretty positive about the board, and there's a lot of positive attributes about it. The board's really fast down the line. For the most part, I had a great time surfing it. Did you struggle with it in any way? Where did you find problems with it, if any?
Sure. So, I thought it was a great board. So, but happy to talk about a few things here. When I first jumped on it, paddling was reasonable, but it's not the best paddling board. And we surf some spots that are pretty hard to catch waves at, pretty competitive.
Right.
And so this is sort of in the middle, maybe a little bit tougher on the wave catching. And then the other thing was, every so often, depending on the wave and the turn that I was doing, but this part of the board, sometimes would catch, and I think we've talked about being a fairly fast board down the line, and that's because the entry rocker's low, and I think the downside to that is you'll get some catch up there every once in a while.
It's funny that you say that because you're finding difficulties here, and my difficulties were coming in like across here as the water runs across. Sometimes it would catch here. Sometimes on my bottom turns, I felt like it didn't have the support I was looking for, even though it has that rail, that rocker in the tail. I just felt like sometimes I felt like it wasn't giving me what I was looking for, or it was catching a little bit there. But if we think about it, you're a little bit more centered on your board in your stance, and I'm a little bit more, I have a narrow stance, so I'm more in the back. Your problems were, if any, up here, and mine were back here. So it's all relative to how we surf and the wave we're surfing. And I think too, I'm finding those problems where the wave's either really steep or really flat. So I come down the line, I got a lot of speed, and all of a sudden the wave goes flat, and I'm thinking I'm going to jam a big turn. It's like, oh, okay, adjust. Yeah. And when you're in the adjusting part, that's when I find like a board's going to show its problems.
Right.
Right?
Would
you agree with that?
Exactly the same with me. So I get some speed, ready to do a big cutback, and that front rail kind of catches.
The wave goes flat. You're like trying to. It's already engaged. You've committed. Yeah. Is basically what I'm saying. So the other thing too is, this is the one that I've only ridden a couple of times. This is the FCS 2 plugs, but like his glass jobs are really light. So the board, you can feel the flex, and it's very responsive, and it's super light. How did yours hold up?
Yeah, so I beat my board up pretty good, and my board was glass, as a high performance glass job. It's standard PU, and you're exactly right. So Xanadu he made these boards for high performance surfing, and so he wants some flex out of it. He doesn't want a heavy glass job on there. Right. So yeah, my board was glass light. I ended up buckling my board. I banged it up pretty good, but I surfed it all, most of the summer, and surfing quite a bit because we had good waves this summer.
So I agree. Overall, the Moskah was a great board for me. I had a good time. I find this to be a great daily driver in that 3 to 6 foot range. It goes really well, and I feel like the board's relatively forgiving. I recommend it for intermediate. I think even the pros would have fun on a board like this, and they would grovel real good on it.
For sure.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's review. Max, thanks for joining us on the show. We really appreciate it. Yeah. Special shout out thanks to Xanadu for sending these boards down for review. And until next time, you can find us at surfandshow.com. We'll see you in the water. Bye-bye.
Can I get on up? 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 Since you're taking all my time, ain't no friend of mine. keep praying. Come on, you wanna find the truth? Can I get on up? Can I get on? Get on up. Get on up. Said you're taking all my time, ain't no friend of mine. You gotta keep praying. You wanna find the truth? Can I get on up? Can I get on? Can I get on up? Get on up. Since you're taking all my time, ain't no friend of mine.